Hello, Danvers. This is Mark Zubrick from the Topics of the Town News, and I have two special guests with me today. I have Eric Crane, the school committee. He's no longer chairman, but he's a school committee member. And we have Natalie Fiore, who is the trustee for the library. What we are going to do tonight is we're going to explore the functions and operations and how to get involved with both of these elected positions that we have in our government. This is going to be our special report number 3, and it is for Danvers Government in Action. What, who, when, and how. Welcome to our broadcast. A special report. The residents have been asking a question. Who really runs our town government? What type of government do we really have? When and how does our government work? How does an average resident get involved? Who really runs this town? The town has placed all this information on their website, and the information is not readily available. Therefore, this presentation, because all of these questions have been asked. Now, I'll introduce my favorite member of our world community, Albert Einstein. And the point here is that I, as Albert Einstein feared back in his days, I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots. I've used this over and over again, but I think it's proving me right because I think we get so wrapped up in the internet and websites and all kinds of communications, Facebook, but we don't talk to each other. And this is an opportunity for us to communicate with our viewers and all of the taxpayers in town. So the agenda and opinions are solely by the Topics of the Town host, guests, and contributors and commentators. I just want to make sure that this is all public information. This will be a 3-part series focusing on the government in Danvers. And I'll just give you a brief description. Part 1 is going to be the history of the town meeting and the government and the current town meeting organization. And one of the things that we have to realize is that camera has the light on, and that's the one that's focusing on us, and I'm forgetting that. So second part is going to be on the Board of Selectmen and the Town Manager Act, how they interact, and what kind of involvement the general public will get to be involved. And the third part, which we're doing right now, is the school committee and the superintendent, with the library trustees and the library director as the fourth function of our government, where we'll see that in the organizational chart that we have. And both of you are town-wide elected. So you have responsibility and authority for the entire town. The town seal represents the entire story of this whole government. And if in the town of Danvers incorporated in 1757, and the key words on here is the king was unwilling to dedicate the territory to the town of Danvers at that time, and that's when our forefathers, and there may be your forefathers or anybody's forefathers, have basically broken off from the city or territory of Salem. So what I like to do is We have an org chart for the entire town. Basically, it is very simple. Registered voters are the giver of authority to your organizations. And that really goes right to the representative town meeting. And then the registered voters really are for select board, school committee, and the library trustees. And all 4 of those organizations, with Pat Frazier as the town moderator, they represent the entire town government. So what we'll be talking about today is the school committee. And what I've asked my hosts, my co-hosts, is that maybe what we can do is give a little history of your organization and your participation. And I have raised a few questions here, but I'll lead those on if we go through.
Sure.
The key thing for the school committee is, what is your authority and where does it come from?
Okay.
Who dictates what you do at the school committee?
Okay, you're going to start with the schools?
Oh, the schools are always first.
So if we talk about the history of school committees, and I'll kind of go through what you've asked me to. If I get into an area that you say that's not that interesting, let's talk about something else. Stop me.
I will pull you back.
But the school committees throughout the Commonwealth are actually a product of the state government.
Right.
Under Chapter 41, I think it is, every town and every city has to have a school committee. You don't have a choice. So it's not, Danvers could not, for instance, say, we won't have a school committee. We're just going to let the selectmen do it. Oh, well, no, now there's no
That one.
There we go. Okay. So once that happens, let me back up. Okay. So you have to have a school committee. School committees are actually one of the only 2 boards that must be elected. You cannot have an appointed school committee under the statute. Now, someone will say, well, wait a minute, Boston's had an appointed school committee. Boston used to have an elected one until, I believe it was the Flynn administration or maybe Tom Menino's administration. They did a home rule petition to go to an appointed one. Now they're talking about going back to an elected one. So, but basically under the statutes, the selectmen and the school committee are the only 2 boards that must be elected by the town. If you go back before 1993, which was when the Education Reform Act passed, the powers of the school committee were really large. That is to say, you go back and look at some of the old Danvers Heralds that are now available on the Peabody Institute Library website. Thank you. I love to peruse those. You'll find that the school committee previously used to not only hire the superintendent, but actually approve the hiring of individual teachers, coaches, did the budget as they do now, and had more control over the budget than we have under the Education Reform Act. The school committees used to basically have all the powers over the schools. And you can see where, depending on who you had elected to school committees in those days, it could become, and the whole school system could become a very political organization in terms of who got hired to teach, who got hired to coach. So with education reform in 1993, along with MCAS and along with more money from the state to support local school systems, the powers of the school committee were really cut back, and to the point that we basically have 3. One, it's up to the school committee to hire the superintendent.
Right.
2, up to the school committee to recommend a budget for approval by town meeting. And 3, the school committee sets policy for the school system. Now, the duty and ability to set policy for the school system is tempered quite a bit by state statute and regulation. This is the book we get every so many years. This happens to be the 2023 edition. This is the selected
This is to the camera.
selected Mass General Laws for 2023 for school committees and school personnel. So this covers everything from union bargaining to powers of the school committee to special education regulations to everything that, we look at and that we do. So
But
even though,
excuse me,
Sure.
just if I may interrupt, the school committee adopted that book, didn't they? Or
No.
So it was
No.
by state law.
what's in this book, this is simply a collection of the Massachusetts general laws that may or in some way or obviously do apply to schools or school personnel. This is something, these are the, basically, you look at the legislation books in the library, right? And there's like 30 of those green volumes with all the chapters of the Mass General Laws. What they do with this for school committees and school personnel is just put all the school ones in one book. But nonetheless, this is what, 200-300 pages at least of potential rules and potential statutes that do apply to schools. So for instance, it talks about the general laws empower the Department of Education here to set what schools must teach in their curriculum, must be included in the in what we teach at all the different grade levels. And the regulations that come from the Department of Education talk about what years different things would be taught to different students so that there is a consistency within the Commonwealth of what is taught to each student so that a fourth grader in Danvers is going to receive the same material, hopefully, as a fourth grader in Mendon, down the Cape, wherever. One of the things the Education Act in 1993 did was to try and bring a consistency to education. So while we get to set policy, and while we have some play in terms of specific policies, every school must have a bullying policy here, an anti-bullying policy. Statute requires that we do that. We can present a proposed policy. The Department of Education can approve it or disapprove it. Every school has to have special education regulations, and we'll be audited by the state in terms of how we are presenting the special education curriculum. So while we have the right to set policy, it is within a framework of you can't just go and do what you want. You have to observe certain, within certain requirements that are handed down by the Department of Education. And they're fairly broad, but there are still limits to what we can and cannot do. We couldn't decide on our own, we're not going to do MCAS.
I think we can, but that's a different day, a different issue. Let me just bring you back to how many school committee members are elected?
Oh, sure.
And what do they actually do on the school committee? And you're pretty much leading into that by guidance to that green book.
Sure.
And how do people get involved with the school committee?
You mean as a member of the school committee or as interacting with the school committee?
Both.
Okay. So Danvers happens to have a 5-person school committee. The minimum under statute is 3. And you could have more. A town has to have at least 3, but you could have 5 as Danvers does, or some could have 7 or 9. In most cities, the mayor is actually the chairperson of a school committee.
Right.
In Danvers, as a town, we don't have a mayor. One of the 5 elected school committee members is chosen each year to serve as chair. We have a chair, we have a secretary, and we have 3 members. All members represent the entire town. There's nothing like a district or precinct. We're all at large, if you want to put it that way.
That's what the org chart was showing, that you're responding to the general elected as an elected official.
All terms are for 3 years from the date you're elected. And because we have 5, what you'll see is sort of a rotating situation where year 1, you might have 2 people up for re-election. Year 2, you would have another 2. And then the third year, you might have 1.
Well, what qualifications do you have to run for school committee?
You have to live in the town of Danvers.
Right. Pay taxes?
No,
No, not
no, because
necessarily,
if
right?
you live in an apartment, you could certainly,
Right.
you pay taxes, one supposes, through your landlord,
Right.
but you don't have to be a taxpayer to be on the school committee. You don't have to be a parent to be on the school committee. You could have children in a private school or in a charter school and be on the school committee. You could have no children and be on the school committee. The only requirement is that you be a resident of Danvers in order to run for school committee. Same, I think, would apply for the library trustees. Yep.
Exactly.
And for the Board of Selectmen
Yes.
and for town meeting members,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Town meeting members have a more restriction to their precincts, the 8 precincts
Right.
that we have.
Right.
So, so the school committee is elected,
Mm-hmm.
and what are their day-to-day activities, and what do they provide for the residents of Danvers? How do they interact?
Think of well, first of all, school committee members, when you say interact, we shouldn't be interacting outside of our scheduled open meetings.
Right.
At least not as a group. I'm sure that all of us have other school committee members we might chat with on occasion. We work together on subcommittees that are set up either by history or by the chair. Chair can come in and set up a new subcommittee that maybe hasn't been there before. But our day-to-day interaction is limited certainly by the open meeting law, and I think you need to look at the school committee and probably the library trustees and selectmen as sort of a board of directors. And each of us, as our board of directors, we have someone who you could look at as the CEO,
Right.
town manager, superintendent, the library director. And what you want to do, and our main job, is really to pick the right superintendent or someone we think is the right superintendent, and then really not get in the day-to-day way of that person carrying out their duties, while at the same time being there on a day-to-day basis to consult, to take in information, to give advice, to reflect what we are hearing in the town.
Well, that was my main point. The main point is, how does the school committee reflect the whims and wishes of the general public, because they address these issues to the school committee members or to the teachers or to the superintendent, but primarily for policy it would be to the school committee, correct?
If it's an overall policy, yes. But I guess I would, it's funny, you use the term whims and wishes.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that as a school committee member, over time you have to learn to avoid is getting too caught up in the whims and wishes of the
That's right.
community. Because I guess the line that we try and draw, or at least I do, and I can't speak for everybody, but especially when you first come in, you tend to want to solve every problem. And you start to realize that you can do more harm than good when you do that. And what I mean is that, and parents have it is challenging sometimes for parents to have to understand this, but if an individual parent is having an issue with their individual child in an individual school, it is not for a school committee member or the school committee as a whole to really jump into that situation. Because again, when you talk about allowing the people who are in charge in a situation in which the school committee is purposely given limited powers, you don't want 5 different school committee members trying to micromanage
Right.
a superintendent or God forbid, a building principal or teacher about a particular situation with a particular student or a particular family. So by nature of what we're designed to do, we should be looking at large policy issues. If you start to hear a lot of the same questions on the same topic in a general way, not relating to a particular principal or a particular teacher, but something that really does seem to touch on overall policy, then that's the time that we can reflect back fairly what we hear to the superintendent and say, look, this is what feels like is happening. What can you tell us about it? Can we talk about this? Can we put it on an agenda? But we can be a source of information to the superintendent to help him do his job.
But the only final recourse, and I will throw this out on the table, is that vote the bums out. But it doesn't do anything because you're following a DESE designation of what's supposed to be taught in the schools. You have a superintendent that's independent except for hiring and firing. And then you have principals in each of the schools
Right.
that have a hell of an more authority than the school committee right now, because that's how it's been designed, to delegate the authority down to the individual school.
Well, it probably should be.
Well,
because-
that's it is now.
Yeah, that's probably the way. The way it is probably the way it should be, in the sense that, no matter how much we might be interested in education as a school committee and
Right.
individuals,
Right.
in the time I've been there, we've been lucky enough usually to have perhaps one person who is an education professional sitting on the school committee. The rest of us are citizens like everybody else. And because we spend a lot of time on the subject, we probably are more versed than the average person in the community on the schools and education. But we are not necessarily more versed on the day-to-day operation of a school system than the superintendent, and certainly not more well versed on the day-to-day operation of an elementary school or a high
Right.
school than a high school principal.
That's right.
They have the strength, the education, the knowledge, the experience built over time to know what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis.
But they're the primary influence on the type and level of education that our children obtain in this community.
I would say type or level is probably not correct. I think that
Okay, then
if you're referring to type, I'm not quite sure what you mean. You're talking about specific curriculum? Or are you talking about
well, all kinds of people have concerns in regards to the curriculum that is being mandated by the DESE.
some people do.
Yeah, some people do. And the thing is that what I'm reaching out for is that you have a complement of support for the school committee through the teachers, the unions, internal to Danvers School Administration. They're very important.
Absolutely.
But the curriculum, buildings, unions, and community interests are solely the policy responsibility of the school committee, correct?
Well, again, I'm not. The way you're phrasing it's somewhat vague. No offense to
I
me.
phrase it
but-
in Eastern European language, so that's okay.
But I mean,
The thing that sort of drives education in this town
yeah.
is not the school committee, but the teachers and the superintendent.
Oh, absolutely.
So
In a broad picture, yes, that is true. Drives it, if you mean on a day-to-day basis, sure, absolutely.
no,
They're in the
but I'm-
classroom
I'm-
with the kids.
overall, I'm talking about the whole package that comes out at the end is really not the
We all have a role in
responsibility.
it.
Yeah.
We all have a role in it. It is not the school committee's responsibility to determine what goes on day to day in the schools. We have that, call it that 40,000 foot view,
Right.
where we hire a superintendent, look at what the superintendent wants to accomplish, what his goals are, and to the extent we agree with those goals, then we try and advocate for and vote for the resources necessary to carry out that plan. We have a 5-year strategic plan. We're going to be working on a new one actually this year. And so generally what you'll see if you go to our meetings is you'll see that the individual school goals, the district goals, and the superintendent's own educational goals are aligned with that strategic plan. And then it's our job, and we have agreed on a strategic plan as part of the group. It's our job to advocate for the resources that are necessary to carry out that plan. So it's not.
But if that's when you agree to it.
Yeah, no, we could say,
Right.
no, we don't think
Right.
this is the right goal, or, we think we should focus more on, I don't know, football instead of band. We wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We could theoretically say, no, we don't think it's important that we support STEM, so we'd rather see you support basket weaving. Doesn't mean they have to do it.
Right.
But we could certainly
You can
tell them that's what
influence
we
that,
think.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that I have found, and I like to bring this up, is that all of your activities as a school committee or a superintendent are all dependent on the funding from the town. And does the town in any way have authority to cut your budget? In light of your green book that you brought in, everything is by law, and the thing is that towns elect the people that elect you.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have any authority to cut back your budget? And I believe they do, but how is that going to affect the school committee?
Well, the people, let me put it to you this way. If you talk about the overall budget process.
Yes.
So, we, through working with the town manager and central government, just like the library does, we get together and in February, after a lot of discussion and a public hearing, we will vote on a budget. The budget is a budget that is typically recommended by the superintendent. The superintendent and business manager have generally been working with the town manager for several months
Right.
to come up with a recommendation. Now we say, okay, the budget we are asking for is $70 million. The budget then has a hearing before the selectmen, in which case their only real ability is to vote on the bottom line.
Right.
So they could say, well, we don't think you should have 70 million. We can only give you 69 million. And they might pass along a recommendation to Finance Committee to only recommend 69 million. Finance Committee can either say, yes, we'll recommend the 69 million, or they could say no, and they could actually amend or actually make a recommendation rather for 70 million. They could put the million back in if they
Right.
wanted to, in my example. Then it goes to town meeting. Town meeting does not vote on a recommendation from the citizens or the selectmen. Town meeting votes, as you know, on a recommendation from the Finance Committee. Town meeting, like any legislative body, someone at town meeting can make a motion to reduce the school budget back to 69 million.
Right.
If the motion passes, then the recommendation of the Finance Committee is amended to 69 million, and then town meeting casts that final vote for $69 million. However, based on what I read in the statutes, and I think has been in our practice through the years, the selectmen nor the Finance Committee nor town meeting can say, look, we're going to give you 70 million, but instead of spending $1 million on supplies, we want you to spend $1 million
cannot do that,
on
right.
football uniforms.
Right.
Town meeting cannot do that. It's all about bottom line voting.
That's right.
You can certainly, town meeting members individually, or the selectmen or the FinCom, they can certainly express, hey, we think this is where the money should go, but they can't mandate where that money goes.
But what I'm just as a thought that of the process.
Yes.
Everything that's in your green book, and I'm going to call it a green book because
You can, and Mark, let me say this. I don't want to make it. I pulled this out today. Keep it in my bag.
Which
I
is
pulled
good.
it out for the first time in a long time, so I would actually have some statute numbers, that kind of
Right.
thing. But this book per se is not something that is a guidebook
Well, this
on a day-to-day basis.
This is one of the things that on every one of these elected official boards,
Mm-hmm.
there's a guidebook or.
This
you
is
know,
just a book of statutes.
You're right.
So if I wanted to look, and if I had a question, what can the selectmen do with our budget? What are
Right.
I could find the statute that says, "Oh, selectmen can vote the bottom line," or
Right.
words to that effect.
That's
But
already there.
It's a reference book.
But what I'm getting at
Mhm.
is, does the electorate, the people that elect you,
Yeah.
have, well, I guess town meeting does,
Yeah.
but the electorate does not have much influence except in voting you in or out.
Well, that and voting the town meeting members in or out. In
Correct.
other words,
So it's a
it's
combination.
it's a representative form of government, just
Right.
like the country is a representative form of government. The average person in the United States doesn't go vote on the budget. You influence that by influencing who your representatives are.
Well, the reason I'm bringing this up, and forgive me for being
No.
persistent on this, because every time that anyone brings up any policy issues, or why are we doing this curriculum, why are we not doing this other curriculum, it is always referred, DESE is telling us this is what we have to do.
No, I wouldn't say that.
And then they say, what do you want us to give up the state money? Because I think that's what the driving force is the funding. And the thing is that the town government in itself is funding the schools probably 90%, maybe 85%.
Maybe 85.
tax.
There's more money coming in from the state and from other sources. But
Right.
the majority of funding comes from the town, sure.
All right, so that was a concern that has been raised many times, but
Well,
what
that-
I want to do is relate this thing back into the library, and what kind of a relationship does the school department have with the library, and what can the school committee ask from the library trustees, or vice versa, because you're both in education, and it is a relationship, symbiotic.
I guess you could call it that.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, from a school committee and library trustee standpoint, I think I would say, and again, I'm speaking for myself, but by observation from the school committee and by observation, you may add this, Natalie, in terms of the trustees. My expectation is that the school administration is going to work cooperatively with the library administration to help and assist each other in a way that
That's-
works for the students.
that's
So
my
I know
point.
the
Correct.
library through the years has been terrific, and it's just one small example, but making sure that if we have a summer reading program, there are adequate copies of the titles available for our students. Seems like a small thing, but otherwise you'd have parents having to go out and buy copies, and it really is a big thing. So I think during the course of the year, when opportunities arise where either we can be helpful or the library can be helpful to what we're trying to accomplish, I think that there is a good working relationship between, not the
That-
boards, because that's
Yeah,
that's at a level that is beyond what's necessary. But from the superintendent and the schools and the library director and staff, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
well, that's the point I was trying to make, because you're both in the education arena, and one serves a purpose for the other, and vice versa, because that's when the students come into the library and read the books that you have recommended, or general reading.
Right.
So now what I like to do is, Eric, I want to thank you very much for being so patient with me, and I told you I'm going to stop talking.
That's
That's
okay.
not me. So what I'd like to do is introduce the other half of this education arena here, is the library trustees. And Natalie, if you can just give us a rundown similar to what we just went through with Eric.
Well, I don't think it's going to be as well versed as Eric by no means. So I've got big shoes to fill here. But so we also have a Mass General Law, Chapter 78, that we have to go by, and
But that's for the organization
Correct.
and establishment of the library itself
of
and
trustees.
the trustees
Mhm.
themselves, right?
Right.
Who runs the library?
Well, we do have a director that runs the library, who speaks to the trustees. So she reports to us every month, and we are in charge of the hiring and firing, so to speak, of a director if that's necessary.
But that's your primary function to make the library work.
Correct.
And she or he runs the library
On a day-to-day basis.
on a day-to-day basis. So that's an important position, similar to a superintendent at the school
Correct.
department or
Mhm.
the town manager.
Right.
Voters, how many trustees are there? How many are elected each year?
Yep.
And what do they need for qualifications?
So we have 9 trustees. 3 run for re-election or for election at a time. And just like the school committee, the only real requirement is to be a resident of Danvers.
Okay, and doesn't have any other requirements?
No other requirements at all. No. Just usually it's people have a love for the library or a love for reading, but it's none of that. You don't even have to have a library card to be a trustee.
Well, you know what? I just dug up my old library card from the 70s. And it's still a hard copy
Yep.
cardboard.
There you go.
And I'm going to have to bring it in. Maybe it's an
Oh.
antique.
You need to
I
get the
think
new
so.
one with Endicott Peabody on it.
Yes.
With George Peabody.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I may have to. But,
Yes. One of our staff, Drew, designed that.
There you go.
is that right?
Yes. Yep.
What functions do the trustees perform other than hiring the library director?
Mm-hmm.
And you have funds that are in a trust.
We do.
And then you have funding from the town hall.
And from state aid.
And
So I can actually tell you, we did just have our meetings, so we do have quite a large trust. And really, our biggest responsibility is to manage this trust in a very thoughtful way to make sure it's going to be there for many years to come. So we do work with Cornerstone Financial Partners out of Beverly, and so we keep a close eye month to month. And right now, we have $571,207 in the
I hope
trust.
you make it grow.
Well, we are up almost 5.5% this year. Of course, the market's been pretty volatile, so that's been a challenge for
Now-
us a little bit.
The library itself is under your direction as trustees, inside and outside, or just inside?
So the town owns the grounds. So everybody says, oh, the library lawn, the library's pavilion, things like that. But that's not exactly how it is. So the town owns the land. The DPW is very kind to us, very, very kind. So that if we say, geez, we have a tree that looks a little iffy, things like that, they'll come down and assess. So they are very accommodating to whatever we need on the grounds. The building itself is owned by the town, and the inside, we really use our own budget money for cosmetic type things, of course, we've had a roof leak before, things like that. The town will jump in. They don't make us deplete our whole budget to fix something like that. So, but if we need new carpeting or we want to freshen up some of the racks or things like that, we will use
More
our
aesthetic,
budget
right.
or the state aid funds that we get.
Okay, now just as a clarification, because I think a lot of people are confused, is the library is supported by taxpayer money plus state aid plus trustee money.
Trust fund money, yes.
Trust fund money.
Yes, yep.
Trustee money, yeah.
Trust
you
me.
don't
No,
wanna
I'm not.
donate.
No, well, I do donate to the library, but yes, no, my pockets aren't that deep.
So basically, it's a organization that's been established for the enrichment of the library itself, because that's a community function,
Correct.
and it's by statute that's how it's going to be operated.
Correct.
Now, you have trustees that have been on there for, I don't know, some of them 15, 20 years.
Correct.
And the thing is, what we need to do is, the opportunities are there every year for at least 3 members
Mm-hmm.
to either run as a library trustee,
Mm-hmm.
even though they may get defeated, but the incumbents sometimes have to step back and look at what
Correct.
the community really wants.
Correct. I would encourage anybody to run. I know that Danvers sometimes does vote heavy on incumbent. To that, I would say that I would love anybody voting for anything and anybody to do a little research on if a board member is actually attending meetings,
Right.
involved, how they are voting on things, if they're engaged at all. And if someone isn't, then perhaps it's time for somebody new to bring their talent and their ideas to the table.
So what I would suggest, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is library trustees have a handbook.
We do.
And being a former selectman, and I don't know if you ever seen that handbook for the library, Eric.
I don't think I've seen the specific one.
I
for the
haven't.
library,
I
no.
haven't yet, and that's 35 years ago. And the thing is that I think that needs to be disseminated a lot more, of how does the library trustee function, and what really authority do they have?
Right. Exactly, because I think people think that we have a lot of authority that we really
Right.
do not have. And we do give this out to every new board member to try to learn really what our role is. But I think the public is more than welcome to and encouraged to look at it, to see that we don't get involved in staff issues.
Similar to the school committee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is very similar in a
Right.
lot of
In
cases.
some ways, yeah.
We are there to try to support the director. That being said, again, when you hear certain things over and over again, then maybe the trustees do have to ask a question and sort of step in and get to the meat of what's going on.
Well, the overriding question that I have in regard to both your organizations, because they're both elected, they're general town-wide elections, they're not specific. And how does the town manager get to either support or not support or influence your actions in both the school committee and the library trustees? I think school committee is probably, I think there's a statute that the town manager or Boston has the mayor as the chairman of the school committee, and they influence a lot on the budget and the policies at that stage.
Boston is one of the cities that
I
I
think
don't
Salem
believe.
is too.
Well, Boston, I don't believe actually has the mayor as chair of the school committee.
They
I
used
believe,
to, but okay.
Yeah, Boston, I don't believe does, but you are correct. Most cities, the mayor does sit. So the question is, how does the town manager influence what we do?
Yes.
I guess I would say, I guess the same way we influence what he does. And what I mean is, the town manager, I have found, and it was the same with Wayne, and it's the same with Steve, recognizes the importance of a good, strong school system, recognizes the importance of a good library as a value to the town. And I have always found town managers to work cooperatively with us, to work, I don't want to say hand in hand, because sometimes there are going to be differences, but by and large, it should be, and I think has been, a mutually cooperative effort to, hey, what are the
Priorities.
priorities
Yeah.
and what do we have? What are the resources that
Right.
we have for everything? And that's really up to the town manager's job in many ways, is to look at that big picture and say, what are the resources that are available to do everything that we want to do? And then to work with the school committee or library or housing group or whatever it is, selectmen, to figure out what are the things we really, need to get done, what are the things we want to get done, and how do we take this limited pie and figure out the best way to spend our resources. And I have never found, in my experience, to have a town manager try and dictate to the school committee, and I can't speak for Natalie, obviously, but it's never been that kind of,
Yeah, not to the library either.
where the town manager looks at it as a fiefdom and tries to tell you what to do. It's always been a cooperative relationship for the good of the town.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is because in the past, and I don't know how far back, there was a influence that the town manager would participate in budget negotiations or budget revisions, because he had the final purse string at the end, because every time the town school committee comes in with a budget, at one time the joke in town was the school committee comes in with 5.5% increase, the town manager gives them a 3.5% increase, so they agree and let's go away.
That's overstating, I think.
Well, no, but that was the
maybe it was the perception then.
Yep.
But clearly, and we've made no secret about the fact that in developing our budget, we work with central government. You can't. It makes no sense for a school committee to come in and say, we want 15%,
right,
when that is completely out of the realm of possibility. But
that's what almost happened this past year.
No, because
something similar.
It was even the money that we were talking about was not necessarily out of the realm of possibility. Right. But what I'm saying is, you try and spend those months leading up to the actual budget discussions and passage in February and March, looking at what is possible, working with. So yes, do we work with central government to figure out what's possible? Yes. Does the town manager have veto power over either what the library seeks or what the school committee seeks? No.
Okay. I'm just referring back to the comments that were made. This was 25
Fair
years
enough.
ago.
But even back then, it probably wasn't true.
Well, whatever. Okay. So my final resolution to this question is, how can we make the library and the school department work closer? Is there anything that needs to be done? And what I was thinking of is the people that are elected to library trustees and the people that are elected either in the school department, no, not the school committee, how do they relate to each other over the 12 months, let's say, because we go through a fiscal year and somehow the communications, you're right, you work with the departments in town hall. You also work with departments in town hall, but it comes down to the end when you submit your budget. Is that pretty much, what you get what you wish for?
We've always been really lucky with the library. So, our budgets don't go up exponentially like school department sometimes does because of special ed things, or we just don't have, we probably will have some pretty big capital expenditures coming up at some point, but again, things like that are that big, say a roof or things like that, those are going to be covered. The town is going to work with us on that. They have to. It's not an option. Other than that, we're able to, with our staffing and with state aid, we're able every year to function pretty well. I mean, our budget process is always very simple. When we do go to the town, we never have to ask for a big increase. As a matter of fact, this year, for the first time, we had gone to them with a little bit of a decrease and made it perfectly clear that's not going to happen again next year. So please don't expect it.
Oh no, we have to get used to that.
Well, but that was because we did have some staffing changes. But other than that, we're very fortunate, and we do have really the major support of the town and all of the patrons. So we're very fortunate.
On the school committee side or the school administration side, you have even a more lucrative agreement with the town hall, because we, as a town hall, operate the facilities, the maintenance, the building of new buildings. That is all taken care of under the town budget.
I wouldn't say it's more, I guess my question would be more lucrative than what? And if you're saying is it more lucrative than
Other communities.
Okay, and the answer is no, because buildings have to be taken care of.
Right.
So if your building, and Danvers is one of the few towns that actually has responsibility for the school buildings.
Right.
By statute, most towns, school properties are essentially to be run by the school department. So if you were to look at school departments in other towns that have responsibility for the buildings, they're going to have built into their budget the cost of maintenance, the cost of cleaning, the cost of all of those
exactly
things.
right.
So it's not like you get, Danvers gets it for free.
No. Danvers is
So
going to
it's
get
not.
it for free,
So
but
it's
I
not
think
lucrative.
people do not understand the relationship between the building facilities and the education in those buildings.
Well, we've made it no secret that yes, the town takes care of the buildings.
Well,
The difference would be is, I think if you, our old friend Keith DeVerner, who went to work in
Yes.
Andover, I believe that they have a person in central office, right, who is responsible for the operations part of the
facilities
the
manager.
facilities, exactly.
Yeah.
Now you go in Danvers, you don't have a facilities manager. You have an assistant superintendent whose part of the job is to make sure they're working with the principals to communicate with DPW, et cetera. But you don't have a lot of cost centers in Danvers in the public schools that
Right.
you would have in a town if we were actually taking care of all the buildings.
The one thing that I wanted to get across is we need to look at the overall cost of the library and the school department and the buildings that are included, because they're all related to town hall. And the thing is that we need to talk about that as a whole instead of, the school committee has administrative power over the budget for education only.
Yes.
And the town has the responsibility for the maintenance and operation of the buildings themselves.
Right.
So
But it's a good relationship in the sense
that's
that
exactly right.
it
but
works very well, and
people don't understand that.
it works okay. It works pretty well from the town perspective too.
Yeah.
It really does.
Hey, Jack, if you could put up my infamous Tasmanian devil, I would like to speak to it a little bit, because that is my motto to end this conversation, but I would like to give both of you an opportunity to say something in closing comments, because I have my Jack, if you can put Tasmanian Devil on. The whole issue about the Tasmanian Devil is, I miss the good old days. Remember when you could actually have an opinion without offending somebody. And that has been a closing motto for every show that I've done lately. And I hope you understand, I'm not the Tasmanian Devil, but I do agitate people.
I'm in favor of everybody having an opinion, as long as well, first of all, everyone gets an opinion, whether I'm in favor of it or not. But I like when people's opinions are based on a relatively deep dive into the facts.
Okay.
Not everybody can know everything about anything, but you looking for closing statements, Mark?
Yes, please.
So the one thing I would say is this. The one thing when we were talking about, you have left the impression, I think, that we do all sorts of stuff. We use the state laws or the state requirements as an excuse for what we do, and we can't do anything else.
No, you're an obligation.
Yeah, yes and no. And what I mean is, yes, the statutes say, for example, that you have to have inclusion programs and that sort of. But you know what? Whether the state said we need inclusion programs or not, whether the state said we need to have English as a second language programs or not, whether we have general inclusion programs or not, if the state mandated it. The point is, those things we do because they're the right thing to do for kids. I think kid who feels included in the school, who feels welcome, who feels safe, and feels that people are interested in the success of who he is as a person, are going to be better students. So it's not because the state makes us do those things. Some of those things, Mark, are the right thing to do.
But that's what you're going by, and that's a legitimate reason for doing those things that they recommend. And laws are there as recommendations until they get changed.
Laws are there as laws, but having said that, like I say, I like to think what we do because they're the right thing to do. And the last thing I would say is, when we talk about people who are qualified, your qualification to be on either of our boards or the selectmen, I think should really be the ability to take a broad and long view about what you're doing and to get into it for the right reasons. If you're going to run because you have a particular agenda,
Right.
that's probably not the best reason to run, because you don't like this principal or that library staff person or that person who works at town hall who wouldn't give you your building permit.
That's a great comment. Natalie?
Well, I guess in closing, I would like to say that our library is a treasure, I think, and I'm not the only one in town, obviously, who feels that.
Hear, hear.
Thankfully, post-COVID, circulation numbers are back up, and people are coming in and using the library. Again, programming is back up in person, and I encourage everyone to come to the programs. And we have a new teen room, so we're finding, which school-wise, Eric, you'll be happy about this. I'm sure that a lot of the teens now, with the new room that is been made with new furniture, they're actually using the room, which is great. We had a teen room that sat empty for a long time because it was in the front of the building and it just was small and wasn't working. So, but I would encourage anybody to ask any questions about what the trustees do. It's not a big commitment. It's 1 hour a month for 10 months a year, and
That's the influence that they can have if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in closing,
yes,
I'd like to thank both of you, because
you're welcome. Thank you for having
I
us.
have promised that I wasn't going to talk, but I did anyway. A little less.
You were good.
A little less.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I hope to get the next 2 segments together, and what we'll do is we'll have this edited and committed to anyone that wants to look at it, because I think it's important to be able to discuss these issues. And where do they come from? What is the basis of all this government? So I don't like government, but that's the way it is. It's government is government. We need to live with it.